We have a lot of news to cover in today's video, including some updates for the offseason. Could this be the end of the road for Carey Price in Montreal? Plus, we have some trade rumors concerning players like Ivan Provorov in Philadelphia and Jacob Chychrun in Arizona. Lots of comments were made today at locker room cleanup days that leads us to think we could see deals on the horizon for those defensemen. Plus, we also have updates on some players retiring. We had another situation with an EBUG, an emergency backup goaltender. We have a Detroit Red Wings announcement that coach Jeff Blashill will not be back, and a whole lot more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a ton of news to talk about here today. First up, we have news on the NHL waiver wire. A few players have been placed on waivers with the intention of being able to assign them to the American Hockey League so they can continue their season to play with the AHL playoffs for their, obviously for the affiliated teams for where they're in the NHL. So Michael Del Zotto in Ottawa has been placed on waivers. The hope there is to get him to Belleville for the AHL playoff run. And of course, the Canucks have players like Nick Petan and Sheldon Dries also on waivers for the intent to send them to Abbotsford so they can continue their seasons. Of course, there's really no point in making a waiver claim if you're any other NHL team. For the most part, you have half the league season is now over, and the teams going to the playoffs can't add to their rosters anyway. So if a waiver claim was made, it would just be to get them to their American Hockey League affiliated team, and we're probably not going to see that happen most likely. So I'd suspect these players clear. We also saw that the Red Wings yesterday had placed forward Taro Hirose on waivers as well, and he cleared today. Same thing, of course, to get him to Grand Rapids to finish up the season in the American Hockey League. And of course, we saw another situation last night where we had an EBUG, an emergency backup goalie, come into the game. Not something you see very often, but it's always a very memorable experience when we do. The Anaheim Ducks, of course, had both goaltenders, John Gibson and Anthony Stolarz, both have to leave the game due to injury, which brought on a man named Tom Hodges, who was an insurance salesman, who was a fairly young man still, played at, I believe, the high school level. I can't remember what his full background was, but it came on in relief in the third period, and certainly, didn't get the job done for getting them to win, but it still did really well considering. Gave up a power play goal, but really, at this point in the season, the Ducks were not going to the playoffs. It really wasn't going to make a huge difference to them in that regard anyway. So, unfortunately, the Ducks dropped the game, but a very memorable experience for him. I think he did well considering where all things are at. So after the game was interviewed, said he was extremely nervous. Looked like he had a ton of support from the Ducks franchise. So I just want to give kudos to him, and certainly another unique situation. I know there's some people out there that think that kind of situation should never even arise, that teams should be allowed to carry three goaltenders or have adjustments made to the rosters or something to that effect, but it gets complicated. Obviously, you don't want to have too many goalies on one level because there's only so much playing time, and go from there. But if the emergency backup goalie policy that's around the league, I don't see it going anywhere, but we'll see where it goes. We get one every once in a while, and like I said, it's always a very memorable experience, especially for the person getting to go in and play goal out of the blue in the NHL. Now, we also have a couple of more veteran players that appear to be retiring. We don't have official announcements from them or their franchises, but it certainly looks that way based on how games ended. And we saw lots of handshakes and congratulatory well wishes, you could say, being handed out. So I think Keith Yandle, the Philadelphia Flyers, was doing it at the end of the game with Philly in Ottawa yesterday. So it looks like he might be hanging him up, as well as Zdeno Chara if it's the New York Islanders, and I believe Andy Green too. So it looks like these three veteran players most likely the end of the road. And to be honest, it's probably time. I mean, Yandle, we know, hit the Ironman record this year and took over that spot, which is in jeopardy of losing it to Phil Kessel next season, as long as Phil continues playing, which we expect him to at this point. And he doesn't have too many games to go to match and then overtake that Ironman record streak. So obviously there's that, and Chara and Green in New York. I mean, I think they've played well into their later years, especially in the case of Chara. You could certainly notice that he's still, he's certainly able to play, but he still looks to me like, the last few years you've noticed a bit more of a decline, a bit more of a losing a step, and I think it's probably fair to say that it's time. I mean, it's not that they couldn't be better than some players and couldn't even maybe be like a seventh defenseman or something to that effect, where they could still sort of play, just maybe not full time. But, it's hard to kind of have those roles at the same time. So it looks like they're all retiring. They've all had tremendous careers, and I would suspect that we'll get official announcements here in the not too distant future. Now, we also had player safety hand out a few fines after the game in Colorado versus Colorado and Minnesota, with Curtis McDermott and Logan O'Connor both getting fined for cross-checking and kneeing respectively against the Wild. So I know that was a testy affair. We'll see how things carry over to the playoffs. Those teams necessarily won't meet up in round one, but if they're both successful, could meet up in the subsequent rounds to come afterwards. So we'll see. We also have a couple signings here, nothing too major, but the Maple Leafs did sign Bobby McMahon to a 2-year, two-way deal. Of course, he's an undrafted forward who has been playing with their organization already. He's been splitting time between the AHL Toronto Marlies and the East Coast League's Newfoundland Growlers, but he hasn't had a two-way deal, so he wasn't eligible to be called up to the NHL. So obviously they've seen enough from him to upgrade his contract to an official two-way deal. That'll kick in next season. And of course, we also saw another prospect get signed, and that's the Washington Capitals signing goaltender Garen Bjorklund, who was a 3-year entry level contract. He was a 6th-round pick in the 2020 NHL draft. The Canadian-born goalie's been playing in the Western Hockey League for the Medicine Hat Tigers. His numbers this year haven't looked the overly greatest, but in junior levels, it's really hard to really judge goalies sometimes by their statistics, because sometimes you do see some pretty high scoring affairs and you don't always see the greatest amount of defense in a lot of those games. So we'll see where things go for him. Obviously, Washington see enough potential there to carry on and get him signed. But we did get an announcement from the Detroit Red Wings today that they will not be carrying forward with coach Jeff Blashill, who's been there for some time. Of course, he was a guy, you could say Steve Yzerman as GM inherited him, did extend him once, and I think it's time to move on. They've also announced that assistant coaches Doug Huda and Jeff Salako will also not be returning. It looks as though Alex Tanguay, who had been with the staff, will be staying on. So I think he's probably under consideration for maybe even taking over the head coaching job. It's hard to say. We'll have to see what Steve Yzerman decides. I know Jeff Blashill's been a very polarizing coach. I know a lot of Red Wing fans that have been supportive of him. I also know a lot that have been calling for his dismissal for the better part of about 2 years now. I know many were surprised when Yzerman did extend him, but the last time he extended him, he also did say that he didn't feel it was fair to move on from him just yet, because he didn't feel that they'd given him enough of a roster to see much of an improvement. But obviously he must feel different now. I think we're going to see a new stage or phase of the rebuild that the Red Wings are going through. I wouldn't be surprised if the Red Wings do make some moves this offseason and try to maybe add a couple more veteran pieces to kind of take a step forward. They do have some good prospects that have made an impact on the team so far, and a few more that could be joining them. We saw Lucas Raymond, we saw Mo Sider. Of course, we're likely going to see Simon Edvinsson next year. They drafted a high-ranking goalie, Sebastian Cossa, last year as well, so I'm not sure when he'll make the NHL. That's a little ways off, but still, they've got a lot in the pipeline there, lots to be happy about. Some decisions to be made on whether or not they carry forward with guys like Larkin, Bertuzzi. Do they consider new deals for them, and what do they do? But obviously, Blashill will not be part of that discussion. So Yzerman will move on and find a new head coach in Detroit for next season. We also got lots of comments from players, as I mentioned, starting with Carey Price. Carey Price, we talked about here in recent days, is his career coming to an end? Or if not, is his time in Montreal coming to an end? He's been pretty much a hot topic in the NHL world here over the past couple of weeks, as he obviously made news when he first returned. Obviously didn't get a lot of goal support, didn't have a great run in the first 4 games that he played. Even though I wouldn't say he looked terrible or anything like that, he looked decent, but I do think it was fair to say that even though he did all right, that I don't know that it was, full-fledged what we're used to seeing in Carey Price, but at the same time, I don't know if it's fair to judge him on that because of the fact he hadn't played all season, went through a lot personally, obviously had to rehab some major knee injury, and all that. So clearly, we didn't expect him to be 100% the old Carey Price on day one. That wouldn't be fair. But at the same time, was he having issues with that knee? Was it going to be a problem for him moving forward? And then we get word that he wasn't going to be going to New York on the road trip because they were going to give him a break, but the intention was to play the final game on Friday. And then we found out he was going to New York because he was going to go see his doctor who did the knee surgery last year. And that kind of made a lot of people think, will he play Friday? Is he having a setback? Is there issues that we don't know? And we still haven't learned a ton about that. But I do think it's fair to say that based on Price's comments, that this could be the end of the road. And he was asked in media availability, do you think this could be the end? Like, they talked about that, and his words were essentially that, if this was the end, that he was happy with how it went out. It went out obviously with a big victory. The Habs scored a ton of goals there on Friday. Finished the season in a real strong way. He also said that it had crossed his mind that it very well could have been his last game. So we talked about before, is his future in Montreal? Is it elsewhere, or is it maybe not playing? And we don't know the answers to those questions here as of yet, but based on what we've seen here in recent days about the fact that he was getting another medical checkup with his knee surgeon, and then these comments, you throw that in, I don't know that we're going to see a trade out of Carey Price out of Montreal, because I just don't see a scenario where it's likely that he's healthy enough to make that happen. The second thing is, with the lack of playing time this year, his value is not going to be very high, which we already expect because of the contract that Montreal wouldn't get much of a return. But, I guess we'll probably find out more in the short term. But the way he's talking is like, it sounds to me, wouldn't be shocking to find Carey Price ending up on long-term injury reserve for the remainder of that contract. I mean, given the fact of what we were told his knee injury was, it's not, totally usual, like, to have that kind of a long recovery. And to have it, the setbacks and everything that he went through, it's not common. So I'm not sure that knee is in really all that great a shape, and it might be a bigger problem than a lot of us probably ever realized when we first got word of what was going on and how, what kind of process he had to go through for recovery and all that. So I don't know, but there's sounding like a good chance that Carey Price might be done, but it's not that he's going to be traded. It just sounds like his career might be coming to an end, but we'll have to stay tuned on that here in the coming days to see where things go. Now, of course, on the Jacob Chychrun front in Arizona, of course, the Coyotes season is over. He again was asked a lot about his future, given all the trade rumors that have surrounded the defenseman for a big chunk of this season. And in the beginning, it was basically the word we got from NHL insiders like Elliot Friedman were saying that the Coyotes wanted to trade Chychrun, mainly because they kind of come to the realization that before they are really going to be coming out of this rebuild, he's going to be older. It might be better to trade him now while he's still, youngish, 23 years of age, with a term on his contract. The value might be high enough coming off a career season last year that it just might be wise. Like, you look at players and you think, oh, they're not old. Why would they want to move them? But if you think about it, even when a player is 23 to 25 years old, but if you think it's going to be 5 years before you're competitive, that puts them in their late 20s. And if they continue to progress, in their careers, making a lot more money, and it just might not make sense when the value might be high. You can get a bunch of assets for players that might, be 18 to 20 years old and kind of help that youth movement even further. But now, and it was already kind of mentioned earlier before too, but it just really cements the fact that even though it might have started that way, Chychrun definitely sounds like he wants out of Arizona and he wants a deal to happen pretty quick, because he was asked if he would be okay not being traded. And his answer was that he was signed for 3 more years. The trajectory of the team is the way it's going is very important to him and all that stuff. And he wants to be in a position where he's getting to play in the playoffs, essentially, like play in a week from now, not packing up and going home. So that doesn't sound like he really has any interest in sticking around for this rebuild in Arizona. So we already know he's been talked a lot about in trade rumors, but that just cements the fact that not only do they want to trade him, but he wants out of there. And I think that'll likely, with the offseason being, almost in full effect here. Of course, we only have half the teams officially in offseason mode now. But as teams get eliminated from the playoffs, by the time we hit full-fledged, offseason with everybody here later into like June, July region, I think between Chychrun and his agent, they'll be putting enough pressure on the team to make sure that he's not a Coyote next season. Obviously, there's a lot of things that this team is going to be going through, and he doesn't really show the interest to have any part of that. Where he ends up, I don't know, but I'd mentioned before, one of the top locations or top 2 locations that were heavily rumored before was the Kings and the Ducks. So we will see if they continue to pursue him, or maybe if other teams will get back more so in the mix here. Of course, we also heard from Ivan Provorov in Philadelphia. He kind of lashed out at the media when he was kind of asked about his season. He said that no matter what he says, you guys are going to give me your own grades. And he says that they're all experts at hockey, and they're going to give him the grades that they want to give him anyways, and that his opinion doesn't even matter. So he really lashed out at the media when I'm being asked about evaluating his season and things like that, and that's not good. I know there was some talk that between Ellis or Provorov that maybe they'll be moved. You just don't know. I mean, we haven't even seen them play together really, except for a few games, which I know Ellis was brought there to play with Provorov, and there's all the talk that maybe he doesn't want to be there, which we really don't know the full scoop on that story as of yet. I think we're still learning and kind of waiting for more to come out on that. So it makes you wonder about the future of Ivan Provorov. I know I've seen lots of people asking, saying, really he shouldn't be lashing out the media if he can't take criticism for his, not so great play. Then really, that's part of being a professional athlete. And he's just going to have to learn to deal with it from there. So I don't know. It sounds like to me, and I've been saying it for a while, I think a fresh start would be great for him to get him under a different coaching staff, different system, different city, and just kind of see if they can reset him and see if he can become the defenseman that he was a few years ago, and even what they were expected to be when he was first drafted. But to me, another player that I would not be one bit surprised to see him traded once we get, like I said, a little bit further and deeper into the offseason, when more teams are looking at trading in free agency, which is not really all that far away when you think about it. So let me know all your thoughts on all the news here today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.